Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah here. We are holding a Mishnah Berurah Chelik Gimel, and Mirz Hashem, today we will be learning Daf Ches Amid Aleph. We are continuing to learn Hilchos Shabbos, and we are working our way through the halachas of Amir La'akum and Schar Shabbos. Our learning today should be a schus for Achenu Kol Beis Yisrael, Hanesunim Batzara Ubashivya, Ha'imdim Bein Bayam Ubein Bayabasha, Hamakim Yerachem Aleihem, V'yaitziyeh mitzara l'rvacha me'afela l'oiro mishibud l'geula hashta b'agala uvizman kariv v'neimar amen. So we pick up today on the very bottom of Zayin Amud Beis, the last word in the Shulchan Aruch on Zayin Amud Beis, Siman Reish Mem Hey Sif Gimel. So here in Siman Reish Mem Hey, we have been discussing the halachas of a Yisrael, a Yid, and an Eino Yehudi that have a shutvis. They have a joint venture, a partnership together. And in Sif Aleph of Siman Reish Mem Hey, the Mechaber told us that the proper way to avoid any Amir La'akum Schar Shabbos problems would be for the Yisrael to make a Tanai Koidem Lamaisa, for the Yisrael to make a condition with the Eina Yehudi before they ever enter into the partnership. So if they're buying a commercial baking oven to use together as a business, before they buy that oven, they should go ahead and they should make a Tanai. If they're accepting to take on the work of a field as joint sharecroppers, before they go ahead and accept that field as a joint venture, they should make a Tanai Koidem Lamaisa. What's the Tanai? The Tanai is, look, understand, Eina Yehudi, we're entering into this partnership, but the way the partnership is going to work is, I am not going to have any shaykhs to this on Shabbos. Shabbos is yours. So we have a commercial baking oven together. It's the oven is going to be yours on Shabbos. You'll operate it on Shabbos. You'll keep all the Shabbos revenue. Now, right away, that destroys the equilibrium of the deal, right? We're skewing the deal in the favor of the Eina Yehudi. So what we do is we say that the Yisrael says, look, your Shabbos is going to be your venture. Tuesday is going to be my venture. So Tuesday, I'll do all the work. I'll keep all the money. Shabbos, you do all the work. I have nothing to do with Shabbos. We've explained again and again the reason why this condition, this deal, has to be made Koidem Lamaisa. The reason the deal has to be made before they enter into the partnership is because once they enter into the partnership, then 50% of Shabbos' work is a mutal al ha-Yisrael. He's obligated to do 50% of the work. So just as a simple example, let's say Ruvain and Tony go ahead and take on a field as joint sharecroppers. So there's a third party who owns the field. Ruvain and Tony go to the owner of the field. They say, we'll be the farmers, we'll do the plowing, we'll do the planting, we'll do the weeding, we'll do the harvesting. And what we get for it is we get 50% of the crop yield. The owner gets 50% of the crop yield. And then between themselves, Ruvain and Tony, since they're taking on the field as joint sharecroppers, they have a deal between themselves. From our portion of the yield, I'll get 50%, you'll get 50%. Now that automatically means, if it's not structured in a different way, the default structure of that deal would be that 50% of the work that has to be done on the field is on Ruvain, 50% of the work that has to be done in the field is on Tony. And again, by default, that would mean 50% of Sunday's work is on Ruvain, 50% of Monday's work is on Ruvain, and 50% of Shabbos' work is on Ruvain. So the instant they enter into the venture, the Yisrael, Ruvain, has accepted upon himself the obligation to do 50% of Shabbos' work. If now, after accepting that obligation, he strikes a deal with Tony whereby Tony's going to do the work instead, that means he's making Tony a shliach to do his work on Shabbos. And then right away we would have Amir La'akum problems. So the way to avoid it is make the Tanai, make the deal before you ever entered into the venture. That way the work was never Ruvain's work. Ruvain never accepted upon himself to do the Shabbos work. From the get-go, the Upmach, the deal was that all the Shabbos work belongs to Tony. So that's the way this is supposed to be done. Now, what happens if they didn't do it the way it was supposed to be done? Says the Mechaber in Sif Gimel, last word, Zayin and Beis. Heicha shaloi hisnu b'tchila. Let's say they goofed. And they did not, well, they didn't goof. To Tony, lo ichpat lei klum. Lo ichpat lei klum. Tony doesn't care. The problem is Ruvain. So Ruvain clutched up, and he didn't make the deal. And he already entered into the partnership. What now? Heicha shaloi hisnu b'tchila. If Ruvain failed to strike this deal up front, yesh tikun, there is a way to fix the problem. What do you have to do? Al yedei sheyachzer hamoicher lehem demei hakarka. Says the Mechaber, let's pick one example. Let's say what happened was Ruvain and Tony purchased a field. They purchased a piece of karka. So they purchased a wheat field. And they purchased it together. And they did it as a shutvis, as a partnership. And they didn't make the deal up front that Shabbos' work is on Tony. So now they already own it together. Ruvain already owns the obligation of 50% of Shabbos' work. Says the Mechaber, what's the Eitzah? The Eitzah is, Yesh tikun al yedei sheyachzer hamoicher lehem demei hakarka. They should go to the third party that they bought this field from, and they should have the seller give back the money. So if they paid $10,000 for this plot of land where they intended on planting wheat, they should go to the third party and say, listen, we need a do-over. For religious reasons, for technical reasons, we need a do-over. Give us our $10,000 back, and then, that's mevatel the sale. Now it's as if Ruvain and Tony never bought the piece of land. They got their money back. And then they'll go ahead, make the deal. Listen, we're going to buy this piece of land from the third party on the understanding that Shabbos' work is yours, Tony, and Shabbos' revenue is yours, and then give the money back to the third party. Start from scratch, undo what you did, and start from scratch. Or, says the Mechaber, another Eitzah, Yim karuhu le'ish acher. Let's say the person that they bought the plot of land from, he listens to this and he says, well, you guys trying to trick me or something? He doesn't want to have anything to do with it. So, okay. So Ruvain will find a friend of his and say, look, you got to help me out over here. I have a Hilchos Shabbos problem. I got to undo what I did. Me and Tony, we're going to sell you the piece of land that we just bought. You sell the piece of land to a third party. That dissolves the partnership. And then after you dissolve the partnership, tell the third party, okay, now me and Tony, you don't have to tell this to the third party. Now you turn to Tony. Okay, Tony, we're going to go into this deal now. But now it's understood that Shabbos' work and Shabbos' revenue is yours, Tuesday's work and Tuesday's revenue is mine, and then buy it back from the guy that you just sold it to. So in essence, the Mechaber is saying, you didn't make the deal up front before you entered into the venture. You have to undo what you did, make the proper Tanai, and then go back into the partnership. So, like he said over here, Oyim karu le'ish acher, sell the land to another party, v'yachzeru v'yitnu b'shutfis, and then you'll go back and you'll buy it back from him again with shutfis, but this time v'yasnu b'shas hakniya. But this time you'll do it right and you'll make the Tanai before you actually purchase the land. Now, the Mechaber gives us another case. Let's say the partnership was not on a piece of land. Let's say the partnership has nothing to do with a wheat field. Instead, what's the partnership? The partnership is a store. What does that mean that the partnership is a store? The partnership is we're going to have a hardware store as a joint venture. How are we going to do this? So there are two ways we could do it. One way we could do it is, listen, I have 100 drills and 100 screwdrivers and 100 hammers and and a bunch of other tools. You, Tony, you have paint and you have paint brushes and you have building supplies. So what we're going to do is I'm going to take my merchandise and put it into the store. You're going to take your merchandise and put it into the store. Now we're going to form a joint venture. We're going to sell all of our merchandise together and we're going to split the revenue. Or maybe he doesn't own drills. He doesn't own paintbrushes. But he has $100,000. Tony has $100,000. We're going to pool our money. We're going to put $200,000 together. We're going to open up the B2B directory, and we're going to buy hardware supplies, and we're going to go into a joint venture of running a hardware store. But either way, Reuven and Tony are both bringing stuff to the table to open this hardware store. Either they're each bringing merchandise, or they're each bringing money. Now what happened is they went ahead and they entered into this joint venture before they made the necessary deal to take care of Shabbos, to take care of Amir La'akum and Skar Shabbos. So in that case, says the Mechaber, what should you do? Again, you need to dissolve the partnership, then make the necessary Tanai, and start over again. So says the Mishnah Berurah, how would you do that? He says, "V'im b'chanos," if they entered into a partnership in a store, v'lo hisnu, and they didn't make the necessary Tanai, you know what you have to do? Yachzor kol echad, each person should go back, v'yital chelkai, and take his chelek, his portion, either of the merchandise or of the money, v'yavatlo ashutvis, dissolve the partnership, v'achakach yachzeru lehishtatev, and then start again from the beginning. Go ahead and make your deal, but this time v'yasnu b'tchila. But this time you got to make the Tanai up front. A next scenario, says the Mechaber. V'im kiblu akarka lasis b'l malacha b'shutvis. Let's say what happened over here was the case that I spoke about earlier. The sharecroppers. Let's say Reuven and Tony accepted a field to be sharecroppers from a third party. Now, I think that there's an additional chiddush that's here between the lines of the Mechaber that is not clearly spoken about. It's just inherent to the words of the Mechaber. The Mechaber doesn't give us another case if there isn't an additional chiddush. I think there is an additional chiddush here. What happened over here? Reuven and Tony went over to Siman, or they went over to John, an Ein Yehudi, doesn't matter. They went over to somebody who owns a plot of land, who is not interested in being a farmer, and they said, look, we will take on your plot of land as sharecroppers. We'll work the land, we'll generate a crop. You, Tony, or John, whatever your name is, the owner of the land, you, John, or Siman, you'll get 40% of the crop yield. We, Reuven and Tony, will divide up the other 60% of the crop yield. So Reuven will get 30%, Tony will get 30%. Now, Reuven was supposed to make the deal with Tony up front before they did this, that all of Shabbos' work belongs to Tony and all of Shabbos' revenue belongs to Tony, but he neglected to do so. So what do you have to do now? Just like in the other scenarios, you need to dissolve the partnership, then you need to make the necessary Tanai and enter back into the partnership. But in this case, what does dissolving the partnership mean? Says the Mechaber, you know what you have to do? V'im kiblu akarka, if they accepted land as sharecroppers, laseis b'al malacha b'shutvis, to do then all of the avodas hakarka, all of the work for the land together as partners. So yavatlo ashituf, they have to dissolve the partnership. V'yimchalu zeh lo zeh, they have to be moichel each other. Now the Mechaber does not say that Reuven and Tony have to go back to the third party, the owner of the land, and say, we're giving it back to you. We're dissolving our agreement to be your sharecroppers. Mechaber doesn't say that. And the Mechaber says that this is between Reuven and Tony. Reuven and Tony agreed to be sharecroppers on this land. Now, that agreement itself is not necessarily problematic. The problematic part is that they took on to be sharecroppers, and by default, what they did was they obligated to each other. Reuven, by entering into this deal with Tony, made a deal with Tony that 50% of Shabbos' work belongs to me, just like 50% of Sunday's work and 50% of Monday's work. That's the part of the shutvis that they have to dissolve. They don't necessarily have to dissolve the agreement with the owner of the land. So what the Mechaber says is, what Reuven and Tony have to do is, they have to say, okay, listen, we took on this land to be joint sharecroppers. By default, that means we each own 50% of every day's work. Says Reuven, that's problematic for me, from a Hilchos Shabbos standpoint. So we're dissolving any agreement between us. And you're going to be moichel me, my obligation to do 50% of the work, and I'm moichel you, your obligation to do 50% of the work. So what's with the piece of land right now? We don't know. Now, let's start again from the beginning, okay? All right, we want to take this piece of land on to be sharecroppers, joint sharecroppers. You know what that means? You're going to do all of Shabbos' work and keep Shabbos' revenue. I'm going to do all of Tuesday's work and keep Tuesday's revenue. Now we have a new deal. Now we could shake on it. We could sign the paper, whatever it is, and we can make a new deal that is not problematic. And then they join into the joint venture, but they do it in such a way that they make the necessary Tanai up front. So, you have over here 4 lines of Mechaber, but the halacha that the Mechaber is saying is very, very simple. You just have to apply it to each individual case. We learned the halacha that when you enter into the joint venture with the Eina Yehudi, you need to make the Shabbos Tanai before you enter into the venture. What happens if you neglect it to? The answer is you need to dissolve the partnership, make the Tanai, and re-enter into the partnership. Each type of partnership requires you to do what's appropriate for that type of partnership. Says the Mishnah Berurah here on Ches Amud Aleph, Ois Katan Yud Daled. In the first scenario given by the Mechaber, we were talking about Reuven and Toni, who purchased a piece of land together from a third party. And on that, the Mechaber said that the way to undo the partnership is sell the piece of land back to the person that you bought it from, make the Tanai, and then buy it back again. Says the Mishnah Berurah, if you take a look at Shulchan Aruch Choshen Mishpat, it says, Shetzarech ato kinyan mechadosh. This is not just a wink-wink. If you bought the land from the third party for $10,000, you need to give him back the $10,000, lahaknois lahamoicher. The moicher has to make a kinyan. He has to really take the $10,000 back. It's not enough to just, give him the envelope back and give him the shtar back and then just take everything back again. No, there has to be real kinyanim over here. There's a lot of talk and a lot of raid in Siman Kuf Peites, Siman Kuf Tzadik Daled. What kind of kinyanim do you have to make with an Eina Yehudi? So if this piece of land was bought from a third party who was an Eina Yehudi, the halachas of kinyanim are not the same by a Yisrael and by an Eina Yehudi. So if we're saying that you really have to give the money back to the Eina Yehudi that you bought the field from, and you really have to redo this entire sale, what kind of kinyanim have to be used? So you have to look over there in Choshen Mishpat. This happens to come into play where you see this Shaila Halacha L'Maisa of the halachas of kinyanim for Einam Yehudim. It comes into play every year when it comes to selling the chametz. You don't see it because most people, when they're selling their chametz, what they're doing is they're going to a Rav and they're making the Rav an agent to go sell their chametz to an Eina Yehudi. But when the Rav does the deal with the Eina Yehudi, he has to be very careful to use kinyanim that are efficacious, kinyanim that work when you're dealing with an Eina Yehudi. And halacha l'maisa, usually the Rav uses a whole bunch of different types of kinyanim to make sure that he's yotze all the days, and he uses a kinyan that actually is efficacious with an Eina Yehudi. I'm just going to mention, because it struck me while I'm speaking over here, I told you that when the Mechaber talks about the case of the Reuven and Toni who took on the field as sharecroppers, and they failed to make the necessary Tanai up front, the Mechaber seems to say that they only have to be mevatel the deal that exists between themselves. They don't have to be mevatel the deal that they made with the owner of the land. And I'm just puzzling a little bit right now as I'm saying this year, why is that different than the case where Reuven and Toni bought a piece of land? In the Mechaber's first case, Reuven and Toni bought a piece of land, and they bought a piece of land under the understanding that they're going to work the land b'shutfis. So right when they bought it by default, Reuven undertook 50% of Shabbos' work. Now you have to undo that so that you should be able to make the Tanai koydem l'maisa. Says the Mechaber, what do you have to do? You have to sell the land back to the original owner. Why? Why can't you just turn to Toni and say, all right, the default deal was this, I'll meichel you I'll moichel you, you're moichel me Shabbos' work, I'll moichel you Tuesday's work, and let's start over again. So it seems that I'm thinking out loud here, it seems that by the case of the sale, the default arrangement between Reuven and Tony is inherent. It's built in to the purchase of the land. The only way to undo that is to actually undo the purchase of the land, to sell it back to the original meicher, make the deal, and then buy it back. Whereby by the sharecropper, it's not that way. And maybe the reason for that is because by the sharecropper, there are two separate deals. By the joint sharecroppers, there's one deal that exists with the owner of the land. You're not buying the land for the owner of the land. You're making a deal with him. We're going to work the land. You're going to get 40% of the crop yield. We're going to get 60% of the crop yield. There's nothing problematic in that deal. The problem is that Reuven and Tony have a deal together that when they were walking to the real estate office to buy that land, not to buy the land, to enter, when they were going to the owner of the land's house to strike the sharecropping deal, they're talking to themselves and they're saying, okay, we're going to go take this land on as sharecroppers, right? We're doing this as a joint venture. That means 50% of the work is on me, 50% of the work is on you, right? So if they didn't talk about Shabbos first, as soon as they take the land on as sharecroppers, they have this default deal. That's the piece that has to be undone. That is completely between the two of them. It's not between them and the owner of the land at all. So there's nothing to undo over there. What has to be undone is the part that's between them. But when they buy a piece of land, b'shutvis, the deal between them lies in the joint purchase. It's inherent in the joint purchase that we bought it b'shutvis, so we're each obligated to 50% of the work. That purchase has to be undone. Okay, very good. Now we go to the Ramah. So now we're here in the Ramah, 4 lines down on Chesam and Aleph, near the end of the line. Says the Ramah, there's another Eitzah. Now the truth is, a lot of what the Ramah says over here, we already saw in Siman Reish Mem Dalid, in a Ramah in Siman Reish Mem Dalid in Sivav. What did we have in Reish Mem Dalid Sivav? We had a case over there where a Yisrael purchased the right to collect tolls from the king. So now all the tolls on that bridge or on that road are going to be collected by the Yisrael, and the revenue is going to belong to the Yisrael. Now the tolls have to be collected on Shabbos as well. The Mechaber told us, you know what the Eitz is? You can't go ahead and hire an employee, hire a Schir Yoim to man the toll booth on Shabbos. That would be Amir La'akum 101. You're not allowed to do that. So the Mechaber told us that there's an Eitzah. You know what the Eitzah is? You hire a worker not as a Schir Yoim. You hire him as a Kablan. What does that mean that he's a Kablan? You're not paying him for $250 for the day to man the toll booth and collect the tolls. In that case, he's a Schir Yoim. He's Mamish your Shliach. That's a Mir La'akum. It's Aser. You hire him as a Kablan, and you tell him, for every $100 of tolls that you collect, you're going to get paid $10. So he's a Kablan. He's being paid for a body of work. He's not being paid for time. He's not being paid for Shabbos. He's being paid for a body of work. He's being paid to deliver to you $100 of tolls that he collected. If he delivers $100 of tolls, he gets $10. The Chiddush, the very big Chiddush that we had over there in Sivav, is it's understood that the Ein Yehudi is going to be working on Shabbos. And that's something which is always usher. Even bekablanus, you're not allowed to be kaiveya malachtai on Shabbos. You're not allowed to say, work for me on Shabbos as a kablan, right? One of the main heterim of the kablan is that he doesn't have to work on Shabbos. If he works on Shabbos, it's for his own benefit. He has a body of work he needs to finish. The sooner he finishes it, the sooner he can move on to something else. So if he works on Shabbos, I didn't have sheikh of it. But you're not allowed to tell him, listen, I'm hiring you as a kablan, but you have to work on Shabbos. Yet over here, it's understood that he's going to be manning the toll booth on Shabbos. That was one chiddush, that's mutter. And the Mishnah Berurah told us, really the Ramah told us, the reason it's mutter is because oh, no, Hefsid Merubah. Because we're dealing with Hefsid Merubah, it's something that we allowed. The Mishnah Berurah spoke out. You're not allowed to beferish talk about Shabbos. But even though it's understood that it's going to work on Shabbos, it's mutter. The other chiddush that we had over there in Sifav, in Reish Mem Daled, was that this is Yedua Uma for Semes. Everybody knows that this toll belongs to Ruvain. Usually, when it's Yedua Uma for Semes, we said it is a Marasayin problem. So we saw over there in Reish Mem Daled Sivav this case of the toll collector. Now, after the Mechaber in Reish Mem Daled Sivav gave us his Eitzah of how to collect the tolls on Shabbos, hire a Kablan, along came the Ramah, and the Ramah said, I'll tell you another Eitzah. Another Eitzah would be, you own the right to collect the tolls 7 days a week. What you could do is you could divest yourself of Shabbos' toll. How do you do that? Rent it, so to speak, or sell it to an Ein Yehudi. Tell the Ein Yehudi, you know what? The toll collection on Shabbos is a problem for me. So you know what I'm doing? It's yours. You pay me a flat rate for the year, for the Shabbosos of the year, and the toll collection on Shabbos is yours. You do the work, you keep the revenue. So you completely divest yourself of the toll collecting on Shabbos. So there's no Amir La'akum, because Nachri Adait didn't have Sheikh he's working for himself. Schar Shabbos, your ownership of the ability to collect the toll is generating income for you on Shabbos. So the Mishnah Berurah told us, no, it's not Schar Shabbos, because you're actually selling him the tolls. It's not that you have a toll booth that's generating revenue on Shabbos. No, you sold all the tolls that would come in. Those you're selling. So there's no Schar Shabbos. That's what the Mishnah Berurah told us back there. Now over here, what are we dealing with? Over here in Reish Mem Hey, we're dealing with a Yisrael that has a shutvis with an Ein Yehudi, and the problem is that there is a Shabbos piece. They own a bakery oven together, and the bakery oven is going to be worked and is going to generate income on Shabbos. We said the way to deal with that is to make a Tanai up front that I have nothing to do with Shabbos. The oven belongs to the Ein Yehudi on Shabbos. But now we're talking about a case where Ruvain failed to make that Tanai up front. So the Mechaber told us how to get out of it. Dissolve the partnership, go back to square one, make the Tanai, and then enter into the Shutvis. Says the Ramah, the same way by the case of the toll booth in Reish Mem Daled, I told you that there's another way out, that you could go ahead and you could sell Shabbos' work to an Ein Yehudi. Says the Ramah, there's also two other ways out of the problem, your failure to make the Tanai up front. There's two ways around, two ways how you could solve the problem. Says the Ramah, 4 lines down, Hagah. V'im yirtzeh, if the Yehudi failed to make the Tanai up front, and he doesn't want, for whatever reason, to go back to square one, dissolve the partnership, make the Tanai and start over again, there's another Eitzah. There's actually another 2 Eitzahs, says the Ramah. What's the first one? V'im yirtzeh, lahaskir le'ein Yehudi chelkai b'Shabbos. Go ahead and sell or rent all of Shabbos' work and Shabbos' income to the Ein Yehudi. So let's just understand what this means. You bought a commercial bakery oven together with Tony, and now you were supposed to make a deal up front. Listen, I don't want to deal with Shabbos, Tony. Tony, before we enter into this deal, the oven, all the work of the oven and all the revenue of the oven on Shabbos, your problem. I'm divesting myself of it. And you're going to divest yourself from Tuesdays. So our partnership is going to maintain its equilibrium. It's still going to be a fair partnership, but Tuesday is mine, Shabbos is yours. That's what you were supposed to do, but you didn't. Now that you didn't do it, you have a Shabbos problem. Because now what are you going to do? The oven is going to be worked on Shabbos. It's going to generate money on Shabbos. There's an Amir La'akum problem, and there's potentially a Schar Shabbos problem. Says the Ramah, I'll tell you what you could do. You don't have to dissolve the partnership and start over again. Im yirtzeh lahaskir le'ein Yehudi chelkai b'Shabbos. What you could do is, now you could turn to Tony and say, you know what, Tony? I realized I forgot to deal with my Shabbos problem. So here's the deal we're going to make. You pay me a flat rate for all the Shabbos. Pay me $5,000 for all of the Shabbos of the year. The oven is yours on Shabbos, and the revenue is yours on Shabbos. So you're divesting yourself of the oven on Shabbos. Now, is there an Amir La'akum problem? There's no Amir La'akum problem. You're not hiring him as a Schir Yom. You're selling him the oven. You're renting him the oven for Shabbos' work. And he's getting all of Shabbos' revenue. So there's no Amir La'akum. He's not acting as my shliach. How about Schar Shabbos, though? That sounds problematic, right? Because you own 50% of the oven. You're selling him all the Shabbos. The oven is generating revenue for you on Shabbos because you're making $5,000. Every Shabbos, the Nachri is working the oven and keeping Shabbos' revenue, but you're getting paid for it. So you're renting him the oven on Shabbos. L'chayra, that should be the Isser of Schar Shabbos 101. So we'll see the answer to that in the Mishnah Berurah. But says the Ramah, this is another Eitzah, how to get out of the Shabbos problem. Just rent the oven to the Ein Yehudi for all the Shabbos. Or says the Ramah, another Eitzah. L'sachroi b'kibaylis. Hire the Ein Yehudi, hire Tony as a kablan to work the oven on Shabbos. How are you going to hire him as a kablan? Okay, you'll make a deal with him, and you'll tell him, I'm not hiring you for Shabbos. I'm hiring you for every $1,000 that you make in the oven. You'll give me 100. Well, no, it wouldn't work that way. I'm sorry. You're hiring him for every $1,000 he makes with the oven. You'll give him $100. Or you make some other kind of deal. For every 100 loaves of bread you make, you get X amount of money. So he's a kablan. He's not a schir yom. He's getting paid for the job. Now, here too, l'chayra, we have to deal, usually by a kablan, there's no Amir La'akum problem, but l'chayra over here, you're being kivei amalachtoy on Shabbos. Right? You're not allowed to hire a kablan and say, okay, you're going to get paid $250 to fix my dining room table, so you're being paid for the job, not for the day, but I'm demanding that you fix the dining room table on Shabbos. That would be awesome, because you're being kavei malachte on Shabbos. L'chera also over here, you're being kavei malachte on Shabbos. You're telling him, I'm hiring you as a kablan to work the oven when on Shabbos. So for these, we're going to see the answers to these questions in the Mishnah Berurah. The Ramah gives us another two eitzes. Eitzah number one, rent the field, the oven, whatever it is, rent out your chelik in the oven, in the field, in the hardware store. Rent it out to the Ein Yehudi for all the Shabbos, and he keeps the revenue. And we'll have to deal with the Schar Shabbos issue. Or hire him as a kablan. By the job. Don't pay him for the day. Pay him for the job. And hire him as a kablan to work whatever it is that you have a joint venture to do the work on Shabbos. Okay? And the Mishnah Berurah, the Ramah, and this is very important. The Ramah ends out the Sif and he says, this is Kemoishet Ispar La'el, Seif Siman Reish Mem Daled, Linyan Meches, Uman Peah Deshari. This is like the halacha that we saw in Reish Mem Daled, where the toll collecting or the coin stamping. If it was mutter over there, where over there you hired an Ein Yehudi kablan to collect the tolls, or you hired an Ein Yehudi kablan to stamp the coins on Shabbos, that was mutter. Now over there, this Ein Yehudi has nothing to do with you. He's not your partner. Over here, kolshkein is mutter, because he's your partner. What's the kolshkein? The kolshkein is that over here, there's another isser, potential isser, that we have to be worried about, which is marasayin. If there was no marasayin over there, where you own the toll booth, you own the coin stamping facility, and you have a nachri coming in and working, and we're saying because it's a hefsid beruba, there's no isser of marasayin, that people are going to think he's your employee, certainly over here, where the Ein Yehudi who's going to be manning the oven is a partner in the oven, there's certainly no marasayin. People are not going to say he's working for you. He's working for himself. Everybody knows he's a shutuf. Okay, now let's take a look at the Mishnah Berurah. It says the Mishnah Berurah is cut tesvav. The im yirtza. So we're going here on the Ramah. Ayin the Magen Avram v'Taz. Mishnah Berurah says you have to take a look at the Magen Avram and the Taz. Sheniskashu bazema oid. They find this Ramah very schwer. The lama yemuter. Why are these two eitzes of the Ramah's mutter? Says the Mishnah Berurah, ain't a doimel l'siman Reish Mem Daled. This is not similar to Reish Mem Daled Sivav, the case of the toll collector, or the case of minting the coins. Desham shari misham seida dafka. First of all, the Ramah said over there, you know why it's mutter to hire the Eina Yehudi to collect the tolls? The only reason it's mutter is because it's hefsid merubah. What did we say over there? We said it's a hefsid merubah. The guy's going to lose all of Shabbos' tolls. It's a hefsid merubah. Adam bahol al mamoinoi, and we're afraid he's actually going to go ahead and do it himself. Over here, we're not dealing with a hefsid merubah l'chayra. Over here, we're dealing with menias harevach. You stand to be able to make business on Shabbos. We're telling you can't make that business on Shabbos. Where's the hefsid merubah? So why is this mutter? V'tiritz Magen Avram b'maskana. So the Magen Avram reaches the conclusion and he says, Tahacha Airi, our case over here is Shemaskir lo yeschelka b'Shabbos b'havla. First of all, you have to realize, he says, when we're talking here that you're going to rent out your chelik of the joint venture to the goy for Shabbos, and we have to deal with a schar Shabbos problem, the way we're going to get around the schar Shabbos problem is by using havla. What does that mean? Ruvain is going to rent out to Tony all of the Shabboses. What he's going to do is he's going to tell Tony like this. Look, I have a problem. I own 50% of the oven. You're going to work the oven. The oven's going to be worked and it's going to generate revenue on Shabbos. I got a problem. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm renting you the oven for all of the Shabbos of the year. But not only all of the Shabbos. I'm also picking 5 random days, or 2 or 3, like the Mishnah Berurah says, random weekdays during the year. Monday, May 25th, Tuesday, January 4th, whatever it is. I'm picking 2 or 3 weekdays during the year, and I'm renting out those days to you as well. So now it's Havlah. Now, when Tony pays Ruvain for the right to run the oven and keep Shabbos' revenue throughout the year, you're not making only schar Shabbos, because he's not paying you only for Shabbos. He's paying you for all the Shabbos and also several weekdays. So now you've done Havlah. Schar Shabbos b'Havlah is mutter. So he says right away, that's how we're going to take care of schar Shabbos. We're going to take care of schar Shabbos in this case. So again, just let's be clear. What's the case over here? You had the joint venture with the Eina Yehudi. You failed to make the Tanai to take care of Shabbos up front. Now you have a problem because you own 50% of the oven. What's going to be with Shabbos? The answer is you're going to divest yourself of Shabbos. How? You're going to tell the Eina Yehudi, pay me $5,000 for all the Shabbos. No Amir La'akum, because Nachri Adaited and Avsheka of it. No Schar Shabbos, because we're going to do Havlah. You're not going to pay me only for Shabbos. You're going to pay me for Shabbos and for several weekdays as well. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Dirshu lesakan mishum Schar Shabbos, and now there's no Schar Shabbos. So that's the Ramah's first Eitzah. Umar deshari b'kiboilus. How about the Ramah's second Eitzah? The Ramah's second Eitzah was hire Tony to work the oven on Shabbos as a kablan. What does that mean as a kablan? For every 100 loaves of bread you bake, you're going to get $100. So I'm not paying you for the day. I'm paying you by the job. That's a kablan. That takes care of Amir La'akum. Yeah, but what do you mean? You're being kivei malachtai on Shabbos. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ma deshari b'kiboilus ma'iri gamkein shelo yichad loy Shabbos b'kiboilus. It has to be that you're not being kivei his work on Shabbos. What do you mean you're not being kivei his work on Shabbos? Isn't that what you're hiring him a kablan for? Says the Mishnah Berurah, no. Ela b'stama. What you're doing is you're telling Tony like this. Kol emas shetasa ba'atzmacha. Whenever you work the oven alone, whenever you're in the shop alone and I'm not there, v'tarviach li kach v'kach, and you generate revenue for me, eten lecha kach v'kach, I'll pay you X. Whenever I'm not there, not dafkan Shabbos. If you end up working alone on a Tuesday, so if you generate $1,000 of revenue, I'll pay you $100 or $500, whatever it is. If you bake 100 loaves of bread, you get X. So it's not a deal that's being made specific to Shabbos. The Ikar Ravusa der Hamad. Now, there's one last problem that the Mishnah Berurah wants to deal with, and that is that I emphasized this when we learned the Ramah. The Ramah closes out his words, and he says, this is just like the halacha in Reish Mem Dalet Tzivav. But now the Mishnah Berurah said, no, it's not. Really, the halacha in Reish Mem Dalet Tzivav was different. That halacha was by the toll collector, by the coin stamping, the problem we were dealing with over there was Marasayan. The problem we were dealing over there wasn't Amir La'akum, it wasn't Schar Shabbos. Oh, you got around that by renting out or by hiring a kablan. But over here, the Mishnah Berurah just said, this is different than Reish Mem Dalet. Because over here, you're being Kaveh Malachta on Shabbos. Over here, there's a Schar Shabbos issue. So the Mishnah Berurah told us how to get around it. But why does the Ramah say that this is like the halach in Reish Mem Dalet? Explains the Mishnah Berurah, the Ikar Ravusa der Ramah, the Kamash Balon Deloy Chashina Bazel Amaris Ayin. What he meant was the third potential problem, which is Maris Ayin. Sheyoimru l'tzarech Yisrael hu oiseh. When people are going to see the Ein Yehudi working, they're going to say he's working as a shliach of the Yid. And he's Kevin Sheyadua, and he says that's not a problem over here. Kevin Sheyadua sheyesh l'Ein Yehudi chelik by, because they know that Tony is Ruvain's partner. So they're not going to say he's working for Ruvain. They're going to say, yeah, he's a partner in this geschäft. That's why he's working on Shabbos. He's not doing it for Reuven, he's doing it for himself. Just like in Reish Mem Dalet Sivav, there's no Marasayan. The Cholshkein Hacha, it's a Kalvachayman, there's no problem with Marasayan over here, to like a Marasayan Klal, because over here there's no risk of Marasayan. Kevin Chu B'Shutfis of Ein Yehudi, because the Ein Yehudi is a Shutif. The Chenataz Masik Ledina, the Ein Mutter Bazeh Ela B'Lavlo, of course, there's a very important caveat over here, and that is that the Yid has to make sure not to have any business discussions, not to hang around the business on Shabbos. We're running short on time, but I got to give just a very quick recap. So what the Ramah is saying is, you entered into a joint venture with an Ein Yehudi and you failed to make the proper Tanai up front, then the Mechaber's Eitzah was dissolve the partnership and start again from square one. Says the Ramah, I'll give you another 2 Eitzahs. Don't dissolve the partnership. Don't start again from square one. What's the problem? The problem is you, Ruvain, own 50% of this partnership and you're obligated to 50% of the work. And now, if Tony works, there might be an Amir La'akum problem. And if revenue is generated by the business, there might be a Schar Shabbos problem. Says the Ramah, I'll give you 2 ways out. Way number 1 is rent out all of the Shabbos parts of the business to Tony. Tell Tony, $5,000 flat rate, Shabbos is yours, you do the work, you keep the money, everything else. And I get paid a flat rate of $5,000. No Amir La'akum, nachri adaita denavshei ka'avid. No, but how about Schar Shabbos? And for the Mishnah Berurah, the way we're going to take care of Schar Shabbos is Havlah. How are we going to do Havlah? You're not paying me $5,000 only for Shabbos. You're paying me $5,000 for Shabbos in several weekdays as well. Eitzah number 2 of the Ramah, hire Tony as a kablan. You own the bakery oven together. Hire Tony as a kablan. Tony, you do the work on Shabbos, and you're a kablan. I'm paying you for the job. I'm not paying you for the day. You're being kaveh amalachta on Shabbos? No, the kablanis deal is not specific to Shabbos. The kablanis deal is whenever you generate 100 loaves of bread, you get X if you're doing it alone. That deal could apply on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, or Shabbos. Happens to be that it's usually going to be negay on Shabbos, but I'm not being kaveh malachtai on Shabbos. And there's no marasayin in any of these deals, because what do you mean? Everybody knows why Tony is working the oven on Shabbos, because they all know that he's a partner in the geschäft. So they're not going to think he's working for you. They know he's working for himself. Siv Daled. Says the Mechaber, Yachal Yisrael litein la'ena Yehudi ma'ois. A Yid could give money to an Ein Yehudi, lehisasik b'hem, to invest, to do business with. I'm not a businessman. I have $100,000 available. Here's $100,000. Take my $100,000, do business with it, and I'll get the revenue, or we'll split the revenue, a percentage, whatever it is. Even though the Ein Yehudi might be using your money and doing work with your money on Shabbos, doesn't matter. You could divvy up all the revenue equally, and you could take the revenue that was generated on Shabbos. Why? Over here, there never was any work that the Yehudi was obligated to do. The Yehudi gave the $100,000 to Tony and said, Tony, take the ball and run with it. Whatever work Tony wants to do with that money, it's all on him. Nothing's on me. That's why he's getting paid. He's making money because he's doing all the work. It's nothing to do with me. There's nothing. I never carried any obligation to do any work on Shabbos that anybody should say that Tony's doing work on Shabbos as my shliach. He's not doing my shlichus. I never had any obligation to do any work here. V'chein, and also the Mechaber says, neither is there a Marasayan problem. Eina esik niker mimihu. When Tony is going and taking the money and doing work, nobody realizes that, oh, that's Ruvain's money. No, Tony is going and doing work. He's investing. It has nothing to do with me. He's totally removed. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ois Cotton Tezayin. If the deal was that there was actual work that the Yid who gave Tony the money had to do, Aser Medina, then it would be Aser for Tony to do work for him because he would be a Shliach. That if you don't make the proper Tanai up front, it would be Aser. Ice cotton Yud Zayin. There's no Maris Ayin over here, Shenoimar. When we show Mexic is Schar Shabbos Leka, also there's no Maris Ayin on Schar Shabbos. That pshat is my $100,000 is generating revenue on Shabbos, and I'm getting Schar Shabbos. No, Darehu B'Havla. Any possible tzad of Schar Shabbos would be taken care of by Havla. You're not using it's not that my money is only generating money on Shabbos. My money is generating revenue every day of the week, every day of the year. Come on, Siman Shin Zayin, Siv Gimel, Siv Dalin, Masha Kasafti, Shom, Mishnah Berurah. Okay. Says the Mishnah Berurah weiter, v'chein ein, and also the Mechaber says, the Asik is not nicker. People who look at Tony using that money to generate revenue, they don't know that there's a connection to Ruvain. V'tzayna Leimar, says the Mishnah Berurah, what the Mechaber wants to say is, to be Maris Ayin, there's no Maris Ayin here, she'yomer abriyoi she'eni Yehudi schirayhu, like a gamkein. There's no Maris Ayin that people are going to say Tony is a schir yoim of Ruvain's. The haloi ein Asik nicker shalmihu. Nobody knows whose work this is. Shem haya nicker, if it was nicker, the nicker al shem Yisrael, and everybody would realize, Tony is Ruvain's business manager, and all of this business that's being done on Shabbos really belongs to Ruvain. Hayaser, that would be also b'shamar sayin. That would be a dua uma for semes that Tony is doing work for Ruvain on Shabbos. That would be aser. K'mashe kaseh siman reish beim gimel sefalv kamei merchas ayin sham umikol mokem. Says the Mishnah Berurah, but you should realize, Kol ze einay mutter. This is only mutter. Realize that when Reuven gives Tony the $100,000 and tells him, take the ball and run with it, he can't instruct him, I want you to do work with my money on Shabbos. That's never mutter. It's just pshat that he gave Tony the $100,000 and now Tony does whatever he does. Ice cotton yud tes we didn't do yet. Let's see the Ramah 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines from the bottom. Hago. V'dafka b'chihai gavna. When we're saying that this is mutter, it's only mutter in a case she'ena Yehudi noisev v'noisen l'chud emamois, where Tony is doing all the work with the money. Avalim kol echad oisik b'yoymai. But if the deal is, look, Tony, I have $100,000. I need it to make money. You figure out how it should make money, but we'll split the work. I'll do work on Tuesday, you do work on Shabbos. That already is a problem. Because then, then it turns out that Reuven is covering Tuesday's work so that Tony should cover Shabbos' work. Then you fall right back into the problem of this whole Siman, that you have to make a Tanai up front to obviate the Amir al-Akum problem. That would be Aser. Closes out the Ramah the Sif. He says, "V'Yisrael sheyesh lemashkid min ein Yehudi." Just another halacha. Ayin lekaman simin shin chafei sif beis v'gimel. The halacha over there is, what happens if a Yid took an item as collateral on a loan from an Ein Yehudi? Now the Ein Yehudi wants to use it on Shabbos. So we're going to see over there that there are halachas what the Ein Yehudi is allowed to do with his chayfetz on Shabbos and what he's not allowed to do with his chayfetz on Shabbos. Why? Because people know that the Yid had the chayfetz. They might think it's his chayfetz. We'll see that later on in Siman Shin Chafei. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ois Kat Yotes, Aser. It would be Aser if part of the work that has to be done to make this money generate money on Shabbos, if part of the work is done by the Yid, that the Yid works certain days and the guy works certain days, then we have a problem. Unless you make the necessary Tanai up front. Okay, a little bit further, let's see Sif Hey. Says the Mechaber. Mutter li Yisrael litain schayra le'ena Yehudi limkar. A Yid is allowed to give merchandise to an Eina Yehudi to sell. Im kotzetzloi schar. If a set deal is made up front. What does that mean? So, a Yid has merchandise. He needs a salesman to go sell it. So, Ruvain wants to take 100 Milwaukee drills and give them to Tony. Tony, go ahead and sell the drills. Now, Tony might turn around and sell drills on Shabbos. Says the Mechaber, this is mutter, as long as the way the deal is structured is im kotzatz loy schar. If an amount was set of what Tony is going to make, meaning the deal was set up front, for every 10 drills that you sell, you get paid X amount. Or for every $1,000 that you make, you get paid X amount. Says, but it has to be that you didn't instruct him to work on Shabbos, because like we always say, I don't care how you structure a deal, you're not allowed to instruct an Eina Yehudi to do work for you in any way on Shabbos. Says the Mishnah Berurah Eis Katan Chaf. Im Katzatz, the Azarmina Nadaiti the Nafshei Ovid Ve'enik Shluchai. If you make up a deal up front, this is kind of like a kablanus. If what you make up front is, for every 100 drills that you sell, you get paid X, so I don't care if he sells it on Shabbos. I don't care if he sells it on Friday. If he hits the streets, if he pounds the pavement on Shabbos to sell drills on Shabbos, he's doing that for his own purposes, not for me. For every 100 drills that he sells, on whether it's Thursday, Tuesday, or Shabbos, he makes X amount of money. I'm not requiring him to work on Shabbos. So that's why this would be mutter. Eis Katan Chaf Aleph, the Mechaber said ubelvad, but you can't instruct him to sell on Shabbos. Says the Mishnah Berurah, realize, im yom hashukhu b'Shabbos, if all of the hardware vendors make a fair, they make a shuk, a market on Shabbos, so then you know that the only time to sell drills is on Shabbos, then afilu b'stama aser. Then even if you didn't instruct him to work on Shabbos, it's still aser. To have a ki'ilu amar mechar li b'Shabbos, because that's wink wink, you were really telling him to work on Shabbos. And he says that in the name of the Achrayim Kaban B'Sibit Shin Zayin Ayin Sham Oid Bazeh. Let's just finish this sif. Turn back to Ches Amud Aleph. One more case. Says the Mechaber Tanur Shelakacha Yisrael Mashkain Me'eni Yehudi. Interesting case. Ruvain lent Tony money. So Ruvain lent Tony $10,000 at 10%. So Tony has to pay Ruvain back. He has to pay him $11,000. He has to pay the $10,000 principal plus the $1,000 interest. You're allowed to charge ribbis and collect ribbis from an Eina Yehudi. Now, what happened is Ruvain took a commercial bakery oven as a mashkoin, as a collateral on the loan. But he didn't take the oven. He didn't remove the oven from Tony's yard and bring it into his yard. The oven is located in Tony's rishus, right? Tony has a commercial bakery oven installed in his front yard or in his garage. Ruvain did not take the oven out of Tony's garage. So the oven is where it always is. Now, Tanur Shalakacha Yisrael Mashke Ben Yehudi. What's happening is Ruvain is, so to speak, taking it as collateral. The Kibel Alava Eina Yehudi, and the arrangement is that the Eina Yehudi, Tony, accepts upon himself Shema Sheyala Schar HaTanur, the revenue that's being generated by the oven, Yiten LiYisrael Beribis Ma'osav. That revenue is going to go to Ruvain as the interest payment on the loan. Mutter Lital Schar Shabbos, Ruvain is allowed to take that revenue, even the revenue that's being generated by the oven on Shabbos, Ruvain is allowed to take it from Tony. Why? Lefishu Berurah Eina Yehudi, because the oven is sitting in Tony's garage. Ve'en Yisrael chelik bai, and the Yid Ruvain doesn't own any portion of the oven. He's not a partner in the oven. V'gam eina Yisrael Omer lo lasik b'Shabbos. And Reuven's not telling Tony, you better work that oven on Shabbos. Ve'eina Yehudi ki tarach b'nafshei tarach l'kaim tanoi. What's happening over here is the oven is Tony's, the business is Tony's. He runs it as he sees fit. He wants to generate as much revenue as he can because he wants to pay Reuven the interest that he owes him. He's telling Reuven, don't worry about how I'm going to pay you back the money. I have a commercial bakery oven that runs 7 days a week, and the revenue that's going to be generated by it, that's how I'm going to pay you your interest. But he's doing it for his own purposes because he has to make his payments. I'm not telling him to work on Shabbos, and he's not doing work for me. He's not my shliach. I have no ownership in the oven. I'm not a shutef in the oven. Says the Mishnah Berurah, you don't need to do avlah here. You don't have to say, okay, I'll take the revenue that's generated on Shabbos together with Friday's revenue so that there should be a shiloh of Schar Shabbos. No, there's no shiloh of Schar Shabbos. The issur of Schar Shabbos is that your property, things that you own, cannot generate revenue for you on Shabbos. But over here, you have no ownership. You have no shaykhis to that oven. So there's no Schar Shabbos. You don't need havlah. So you don't You don't need any of the tanoim that we spoke about at the beginning of Reish Mem Hey over here. This is not considered a partnership that should be problematic in any way. Okay, a little bit overtime, but we got the page done. Thank you so much for joining me for Liman HaTorah. The schus of Liman HaTorah should be Megan against Klal Yisrael. The Rebbeinu Shalom should send Yeshua's Refuas Parnas and Shidduchim to all those in need, and we should be zeichet to see the Bias Tzedek B'Meher V'Yameinu. Amen. Be well.